Hello. Welcome back. It is our third call, our third little episode on co-living, me and Jocelyn. Yeah, and we in previous calls we talked about, let's see, the first one we talked about what is co-living, benefits of co-living, possible systems for sharing work and communication. And second call, we talked about finding people to live with and kind of the role of wider scenes and networks. And I think we started to talk about like what makes good co-living as well, perhaps in that call. And yes, welcome to our third call. Today, we're kind of thinking about maybe talking about conflict transformation, going through some scenarios for working through dissatisfaction. And maybe we might talk about leavings and endings, because I personally think that's a topic that people often don't talk about in co-living material that I've come across online. But yeah, hello, welcome, hi. Sorry.
Hello. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to those topics, Abby. When you mentioned it just now about endings, we came upon that because it's also the end of the year and it feels like you were just saying a lot of things are ending and the new things starting next year. And we're like, yeah, also endings happen in community as well. And one thing about micro solidarity, one of the principles around, for example, setting up a crew, which is a group of 3 to 6 people who set out on a particular mission, usually in terms of like to somehow develop something within themselves or support each other on a project or mission. We always say start with the end in mind. And that's interesting, like in terms of what we mean there is like after you've met, for example, 6 times, you might want to do a retrospective, like how is it going, what's working well, what's not working so well. And it's also a really great opportunity for people to gracefully bow out and say, I really enjoyed this and I'm going to actually join a different group or stop this group or just do something different for now. And then the group can continue on either without them or realize, oh, we want to get someone new, or maybe the whole group disbands. But it's a moment of like collectively deciding what happens next. And it made me, yeah, I'm curious about how what we've learned or what we hypothesize or what our thinkings have been or challenges have been around leaving communities, people leaving communities or co-living groups, and what our experience with micro solidarity could teach us about it, or just or any other modalities or experiences that we've had that would sort of feed into that. And I think it has an overlap a bit with how you navigate conflict. Sometimes people leave in a way that feels like good and it's just obvious. Like for example, in the house I'm living here, there was a family or a couple who had a small child and they realized, oh, we want to have a larger space for us all. It's like, it's not about that there's a problem with like the personal relationships. It's just not the right container in this particular house to have another child. And sometimes it's more because you have, maybe you got a job in another city. It's not that you have a problem with it, but other times it is because there's a conflict or it's not working for you, or the fact that you want to leave and have something different causes tension with someone else. And so how do you, like, if it is based on tension and conflict, or if tension and conflict occurs, how do you also navigate that well together so that either you resolve the conflict and you learn something more about one another, and it actually feels great to stay and you realize, wow, this has actually been helpful for me to learn something about myself, or that everyone comes to like a sense of, yeah, actually it makes sense to move on, and it's not like a rift but more like a shared understanding of, okay, yeah, for everyone, it would be for everyone's good if this person or these people move on to see something else.
Yeah, I think how people separate in general, regardless of whether that's in like co-living context or a crew context or work context even, or romantic relationships or family and so on, like the way you separate influences how that relationship carries forward in your life and how you feel about that experience in your life
Mhm.
later on. It like the way a story ends in general influences how you feel about that story. Game of Thrones is a really example? Sorry.
Yeah, tell me more. I haven't really watched much Game of Thrones, so yeah,
I
what
feel like I would give it away, but like basically the series was really good, and then the way that the authors, no, the TV producers sort of like ended it was really like weird. And there's a huge consensus that it was like that was like the weirdest way to have ended it, and it could have ended in a much better way. But yeah,
Mm.
that's the context behind the Game of Thrones reference. So
Well,
yeah.
hopefully you didn't give any spoilers away. Yeah, you're right. It does influence how you relate to the whole experience. It can taint the experience in the past, but if you have a bad breakup, it also can taint your experience in the next relationship, for example, of like really not wanting to experience that pain again. And so it can be really valuable to be able to end well so that you actually come away with a learning of what you do want rather than like, I don't want to have that experience again. Let me never live in community again because it just causes pain. You know, that's like
Mm,
quite
mm,
sad to come across people who have just been so scarred by a bad ending that they don't want to try it again rather
I
than having learned.
definitely,
Yeah.
yeah, met people who have told me that story, and I feel like, oh, that's sad. But like that was the reason. I'm sure, and
Yeah.
that's fine. And it's up to people, it's up to other people to figure out, it's up to everyone to figure out what their threshold is for experimentation and trying to find alignment. And it is a lot of effort, to join and to leave and to join and to leave groups.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially co-living groups when there's more, like, I guess, entanglement or more investment. Yeah. um
Mhm.
which reminds me, like, crews in the typical micro-solidarity sense often have a kind of like, we'll meet for 6 weeks, we'll meet for 8 weeks or something. There's quite a finiteness, at least to me, in my experience,
Mm.
like a more typical micro-solidarity crew,
Mm.
where you're providing mutual support to each other, or and then you have, a retrospective, and then you might continue again and again and again, or you might just continue, you might not continue, and that's fine.
Mm.
You don't have that. You don't really have that with co-living, I think. Maybe
Well,
in a
it
sense
is.
you can, if you rent with, say, a landlord, you often have like a year's contract. So
Yeah.
there's that finiteness. But like I guess in my own experience, I've usually been in housing co-ops, and it's kind of open-ended. You could live here for the rest of your life
Mm.
if you wanted to. Yeah.
Mm. That's interesting because my experience has actually been that almost all of the co-living experiences I've had have had an end date with them. I just realized that. Like, and actually, I used to find I have found that a bit annoying sometimes because like, I when am I gonna be in a uninterrupted, like I can dream into the future long term kind of co-living scenario with people. At the
Oh,
same time, I've always been glad, like, wow, okay, I got to also like it's felt more experimental. I could learn and realize what I wanted without having to be like lifelong invested co-living buddies. And yet I still had the opportunity to continue living with people if I wanted to. So for example, I can be more concrete. Like um one the first really one of the big co-living experiences I have recently done was like a couple of years ago in France at the Life Itself Hub. Myself, Carl, and Catherine and Nadine hosted 3 1 month long residencies. So people who came were some of them came for all 3 months, but it was
mm,
actually mostly a new group each month. And so it meant that we could experiment with one iteration and then be like, okay, what worked well and what didn't work so well? Okay, let's try it again differently next month when new people arrive. And then we tried it again. And by the third time, I think, even though it was never perfect, definitely not far from it, but it was still like we'd really learned so much by the third time. In fact, I'm still harvesting learnings from reflecting on that. And Carl recently just published a great little like summary of some of our learnings and challenges as well, which I could put as a link
yeah,
to
that's
this
on the cultural
blog.
catalyst website, isn't it? Yeah.
I think it's on the Life Itself
Oh,
website. Yeah, something like that.
right.
Yeah. And then there was also the hub in Berlin, which is also Life Itself Hub, which is now not happening, not there anymore. But that was only ever going to be for 6 months. Then I moved into a shared house, which we could only it was a sublet, and it was only available for 5 months. So the four of us, just 5 months. And then this place where I'm now is the first actually open-ended place that I'm going to leave at the end of this year to move in with my partner. So,
Mm.
but it's like been very helpful to actually have had a few opportunities to have time-bound co-living experiments. Maybe if in fact if I was just gonna jump straight into a co-living experiment for the first time, I would say I would, if I was advising someone how to do co-living, well, I'd say try a few short-term experiments first, like pop-up things, even if it's like a few weeks where you hire out a B&B or something, Airbnb, or you um, go and like live together in another community for a few weeks, something like that. I think it can be really valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we mentioned it in the previous video, but I think, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, why jump into if this is like an intentional co-living setup you're trying to create, why jump into a big year-long contract if you can just like hang out for a weekend in
Yeah.
an Airbnb in, I don't know, the Dales or something,
Yeah.
and just like get.
Dating before you get married.
Oh, that's so interesting. I think your experience as a co-living are like so much shorter than mine, and
Um,
I think that's more of a reflection of how long how long I've been in co-living projects for. So I mean,
yeah.
when
How long have you been in the current one, and what's, yeah.
my current setup has been going for 2 years,
Mhm.
and it could be for infinite. I could live here till I'm 90 if I wanted to.
Mm,
Uh and before that I was in a lodging situation, so that was very much with up to the landlady, but we kind of were sort of intentional because we liked cooking for each other and we liked
mm,
dinner a lot together.
mm,
um but I guess that could have gone on, like it was quite open-ended. It was up to the landlady really. uh,
mm,
and then before that I was in a housing co-op for 4 years, and I could have been there forever if I wanted to as well. And then
mhm.
just like shared accommodation in student housing before that. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And what's the um I don't know, like policy or system in where you are now for people leaving, like, or yeah.
um I suppose you give notice of
Mhm.
like a month, and
To
then
the people you live with, or to who? Yeah.
go to not just people you live with, but the wider co-housing community as
Mhm.
well. I suppose, who would you give it to? The general meeting, the
Mhm.
or the community group. One of our working groups is called the community group. I think internal. It's the in group. There's the in. There's an
Give it that.
inside group and outside group. Like one group that looks within the community and one group that looks out of the community.
Mm.
So you probably give it to them
Yeah.
somewhat. Yeah, and maybe the finance and legal team might be involved.
Mm.
But there's no, like, it has happened. Someone has left the community because they decided it wasn't um uh not my co-living setup, but someone has left the co-housing project, and they um because they weren't really that involved, and we hardly anyone and really saw them, and
Mm.
they had their own things going on.
Mm.
Nobody really felt them leaving, but I think
Mm.
it would be really interesting to see in the co-housing community how it would take place, like someone who's been actively involved deciding to leave. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. And have you had any experiences where people have left based on a tension, like either in this community where you are now, or like either in your co-op housing now, or in previous situations where you've been like, I wish we'd done this, or where you've learned something? Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely had a very difficult experience of someone leaving one of the co-living setups I was um, in a way that suggested they had experienced a lot of pain,
Mm,
and I hadn't known that they had been experiencing that pain and disconnection. Um, like I hadn't known the depth of it basically before
mm,
before they made the choice to leave. Um, yeah, and it felt sudden, and or I think there was quite a bit of mourning in the community afterwards,
mm,
um
mm,
because everyone really like treasured their presence when they were more active in the project, and they had been more withdrawn in the last months. before leaving, I suppose.
Mm.
But I guess that hadn't really been checked in with or anything.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes me curious about, well, two things come up. One is, oh yeah, it's not just that when there's a rupture and someone leaves, that it can be painful for the person who leaves and they end away with, a bad taste in their mouth about co-living. But it also leaves a rupture in the people you leave behind, when something like that happens, and can make people more like cautious or wary, and like, yeah, be painful as well for people who are left. um, and also it makes it, the other second thing that comes up for me is the awareness that often the point of leaving is not like a singular point. It's usually the final moment of someone being missed and missed and missed and missed. And it could be up to them that they just haven't found a way to like bring up their tension, but it can also be that the system itself hasn't really allowed for tensions to come up. So it comes back to my question again, like, how do you deal with tensions so that you don't have a sudden rupture, but you like learn to address things like, a stitch in time saves nine, right? This expression that I always got from my mum. What comes
Yeah,
up for you, Abby? Yeah.
I've been I had a thought once that maybe because we used to have feelings meetings in this co-op, and I often thought it would be more interesting question for us to ask, like, what has made you want to leave recently? We literally
Yeah.
just asked ourselves that question. It'd be more interesting then, because the prompt was the question prompt was just like, how have you been feeling?
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
in the house and outside of the house. So we had a round for inside of the house and a round for outside of the house. So like your personal life,
Mm,
and then your life inside the co-op. Or your work life and then your life inside the co-op and so on. And
mm,
I thought, well, maybe it would be too direct to ask
mm.
has made you feel like wanting to leave recently. Maybe that would
Yeah.
be too destabilizing. It's too
Well,
much. Sorry. I don't know.
I don't know, Abby. I mean, I think it's how you contextualize it. Like, I really like Joanna Macy's work. She's an activist in sort of social change movements, and also works a lot, like has a background from a deep background in Buddhism and mindfulness and all this and compassion. And she talks about the spiral of the work, and she says start with gratitude before honoring the pain, and then the third, like, so start with gratitude, honor the pain, see things with new eyes, like trying to come to a new perspective, and then look for like what's the next step of moving forwards. So when you said that, I was like, maybe I think it's actually really important to be able to navigate by tensions as well. Like, there's a conflict transformation modality or model called deep democracy. Particularly Lewis Deep Democracy talks a lot about navigate by tension and make it easier for dissent to be surfaced in a way that can also be processed. But when we can't like
Mm.
embrace dissent or tensions, it bubbles up and causes sometimes a snap at some point anyway. But how can you also bring that up within a bedding of, hey, we're bringing this up because we really care about what we're creating here? And that's why I precede it by with like celebration and gratitude of what's the thing that we care about that we're tending to here that's worth bringing up the tensions for. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I like that you bring that question of like what's, with that question itself, what's made you want to leave? I think alludes to the fact that everyone's going to have some moment where they have what I call suitcase syndrome, which is where I want to pack up my bags and go, because no one's pinning you down to stay in co-living, and there are some things that are more difficult than living by yourself, and then there's always a choice. You can leave. We're not in like a tribal society where if you leave you're on your own in the great big vast wild, and you're fending for yourself. Like, no, you can still survive fine on your own in the city. But what makes it what makes you want to leave is, I think, something people think they can't say that, but it's also really crucial to be able to acknowledge it without it being the full story.
Yeah.
Celebration
Yeah.
makes sense as
That's why
well.
you have the gratitude first and the seeing ways forward after.
After. Hmm.
It's not just the one pure question, that's it, doesn't it? Don't
Yeah.
just talk about anything else, because
Mm,
it's only one story among many stories you have of your experience.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it? I had a question, but I don't remember it. Sorry. Suitcase syndrome, descent, tension.
Yeah. What's something that's made you want to leave recently?
Yeah, I think it can be a really scary. I don't know. I still think it is a quite a scary thing to ask very directly.
Yeah.
But I don't know. For me personally, there's also a part of me that finds it super grounding to even feel like I feel able to ask and the group feels okay to ask. But I don't know.
Mm.
Maybe it's because leaving is a really, if you put feelings on a spectrum, wanting to leave is, I don't know, somewhat on the deeper end of dissatisfaction, and then there's other
Mm.
shades of dissatisfaction, I suppose, in
Yeah.
between neutral and very dissatisfied. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Makes me really curious how other communities have managed to like catch this in the bud, or like manage to surface tensions in co-living. Um, yeah, for me, the community mastery board, which we talked about in session one,
Mm,
I've I've kind of hoped that that would support us to raise these kinds of tensions, like more interpersonal tensions, but it's ended up being more, we're very good at using it for practical tensions, which
mm,
I think is very good because sometimes those small practical tensions are actually like the build up to those start leading into interpersonal resentment. Like if someone's constantly leaving their stuff in the laundry, or there's people constantly never like doing the washing up, like, or leaving the lights on or the heating on when someone else really cares about like the cost of living and also the environmental impacts, like those things gradually build up towards people having an image of one, and like an enemy image of one another, or a tension image of someone. So it is important, but I think there's also like some of these tensions are more on like, I think the tensions are rising around, or can arise more around like emotional like wishes or like needs that are not being met. Like maybe some people want more privacy, or some people want more connection and like togetherness, and
mm,
or shared rhythm, um, and more like deeper interpersonal things that maybe don't come up when the whole conversation is more about practical stuff. So I'm recognizing in my own um, like reflections on co-living, like, okay, what else besides in my house, besides the community mastery board, is necessary, if anything, to allow us to navigate these like more interpersonal, like, I don't know if they have intentions, it's more like unmet needs or unfulfilled longings or
mm,
expectations, that
mm, mm.
they're more subtle and can go by without being annoying on an everyday level in the same way that dishes are. But it's
Yeah.
more easy to just put back. Um, but they're also equally important to surface. Yeah.
Yeah. That relates to one of the scenarios that I had written
Oh,
down
you want to
to
share?
share with you before the call.
Mm.
Um, Let me just spiff it out a bit. Sorry. Mm, okay. Um, so yeah, I think this is a good point to kind of explore these potential kind of tensions or scenarios that I've written out, and I think can accumulate and make people feel like, oh, this isn't a place that I want to be in, like because of the place, not because of wanting to get a new job or I don't know. I mean, people wanting to leave is often a mix of like internal to the co-living project and external to the co-living project, right? Like
Mm.
it's not completely because of the project itself. There are just sometimes like factors that are completely out of people's control, because it's like, well, I'm in my 20s and I just want to explore another city. Well,
Mm-hmm.
what can you do about that? Or I want to move out, with my partner so I can have some kids, and so but yeah, so we're focusing today on the kind of internal things, though. Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, we could explore that kind of more, um emotional side of things, I did have a scenario more around like, oh, more practical, like one person doesn't seem to be doing their chores as often as the others, which
Mm,
I guess that's a bit more practical, but in some way it is also kind of more interpersonal as well.
mm,
Um, and then I guess in contrast, I did have the scenario of like, oh, someone personally feels like they're not being as supported by the group, even though they're someone that proactively goes to support other people in the group when they see that they're down or they seem to need checking in with. Yeah.
mm.
I'll just throw these out to you,
Yeah.
see what thoughts come up.
Maybe as we were just talking about less practical but more interpersonal, like emotional needs or like the more abstract needs. Maybe the second scenario would be interesting, and then to look at like from there we can see like what kind of what would be helpful, or what tips might we have, or what do we think would be helpful to navigate tension better or to leave well. Yeah.
Mm, yeah. Okay. So let's go with the second scenario.
Mm,
Um, this is not something that um I've experienced this in multiple like setups. It's not unique to one setup or one specific setup.
mm,
Yeah, just to clarify. So yeah, say I'm someone who when I see someone's quite down, I often like text them and go like, "Hey, how are you doing? Like, do you want to go on a walk together sometime?"
mm,
Or this is just an example. I don't. This is not necessarily me. Um, or I knock on their door and I offer them a cup of tea. Um, when I can hear that they're crying, or not, or just seem like they've been in their room for a really long time.
mm,
Mm. But like I uh I don't really get the same back from the group, and I often feel like I am um alone, and I don't know, I feel really conflicted about how much I should ask other people to do that for me, and whether it's fair for me to ask that of them, or like it's all very like uncertain. Yeah.
mm, mm.
I'm just leaning into the scenario and pretending that I'm the person.
Okay, yeah, embodying the experience. Yeah, that's so there's something like you're pointing towards there can be different like capacities in a group for care, and also different awarenesses in different people for how much care or how much to look out for one another, and how much we lean in to like emotional support, if that's is that kind of it.
Yeah. I just don't know what's realistic to expect, or if it's weird that I want this from my housemates, and
Mm,
maybe I should actually just rely on my friends really, and
mm,
but that also means like I'm out of the house a lot more, because then I'll just be with my friends.
mm.
Uh
So if that wasn't addressed, what do you how do you imagine your relationship to the house might eventually shift or change?
I think I would be a bit more distant and less willing in some ways to necessarily like check in. I still would like to
Mm,
check in with people in the house, because I feel good about myself when I do that. I don't
mm,
like feeling like I don't do that, but I don't think
mm,
I like I don't know, invest as much energy as I might have previously.
mm,
Like I understand that this is a group that doesn't necessarily value that in the same way as I do, I
mm,
suppose. And yeah, I guess that I feel a sense of distancing. I think I would still be okay living in the house,
mm,
as long as we maintain some kind of friendly term, I suppose,
mm,
and like I guess more practically supportive ways of engaging.
mm.
Yeah.
So as a like a little meta point on what I'm hearing you saying, it's like, wow, this is where a house shifts from, or a co-living experience can shift from being an awesome experience to being a meh experience, where it's like, yeah, the awesome experience is not necessarily that there's like 100% mutuality, but that we've like been transparent about like, this is what I like to give and this is what I'd like to receive. Can you give it to me too? Like what I want to receive? Yes, no, okay. If not, then I'll do something else. But just to be transparent and like have the conversation. Whereas the meh is, I have this need, but I don't know if I'll get it met. Oh, it's not really getting met. I'll withdraw a little bit and give up on my need. And you know, it's like, I wonder what would support someone like you in this role to actually step in and like express your longing and express your wish, and like to, for what would make the experience amazing, rather than just what you can, rather than being a compromise of a living scenario for you, rather than being something you like, well, okay, I can tolerate it being like this.
Mm, I don't know. That sounds so scary. And also, like,
Mhm.
when I joined this group, I guess we didn't really talk about that. Like, I think we kind of implied some sense of mutuality between each other, and I think
Yeah.
it's implied through the practical sharing that we do. We share so much else. If somebody wants to borrow socks from someone, they could. So if somebody wants
Mm,
to, you know, buy this like bread making machine so that they can make bread for the house, then yeah, we'll all chip in.
mm.
Um
But
sorry.
how do you go from talking about sharing socks and sharing food to talking about sharing emotional support? You know, like, these are so much harder things to maybe announce to the group, is what I'm hearing you saying. Like, it feels more scary to say, hey, I would like more emotional support, or hey, I want to change the way that we are together and not just the things we do together. Is that like resonate with you?
Yeah, I think that is definitely touching on something. And I don't know how I would raise that, or if the word fair comes up a lot
Mm,
in my mind when I embody this perspective. Sorry. Um, and it's as if like something needs to be fair before I can ask for it, rather than it needs to be amazing.
yeah.
It would make my life amazing, therefore I should ask for it. There's two different tracks going on in that way, I'm noticing.
Mm,
And also, um yeah, I'll stop there.
mm. Well, what comes up for me is, again, it's just like having rhythms and times where you know you're going to talk about this is one thing, but also starting out together by clarifying what you can start out together by clarifying what you want from each other when you're going to go be living together. Um, I really want to like link to this relationship anarchy smorgasbord. It's like a PDF, and it talks about all the sort of things that you might want in a relationship, and you can like, it's this great conversation starter for like, oh, do you want like emotional support in your co-living? Do you want, is it co-parenting? Is it like economic interdependence? Is it like legal support or collaboration on projects? Like, what is it? Or none of those things? Is it just sharing the rent? Is that it? And seeing what kind of portion size each person wants from this smorgasbord of relational opportunity. But I think there's one thing to start out kind of having a sense of what you think you might like, and then there's this experience of like learning what the group context actually is, and realizing, oh wait, what I thought I wanted, what I didn't really want, I actually want more of, and or maybe something that I thought I wanted a lot of, I actually don't want that so much after all. And I think that's why this retrospective is so useful. And I think it can be difficult to plan in retrospectives when everyone has busy lives. I think in my house, it's already challenging enough to come together every 2 weeks for a community mastery board meeting about more practical stuff. So I was hoping that would also address more emotional stuff. But I think to go a bit deeper now that we've been living together for like 4 or 5 months, we're starting to realize, maybe we need more retrospectives on coming together for more, um, of like, hey, how are you doing on like a deeper level of like how we are together for our more abstract needs, and reflecting on what do we want in our togetherness, in our together being.
Mm, mm, mm,
Like, what are we celebrating? What are we longing for that's not here yet? And to really be able to slow down into that moment.
mm,
And I'm thinking, it can feel like retrospectives can also feel this bit too like, oh, that's what we do at work or in a project, in an office. And I like to kind of think of what's the the street version of that. Like, what's a co-living version of like a work retrospective? You don't have to maybe sit around a table with pen and paper. What if you like spend a weekend away or something and you have a time around a fire for like a sharing circle, or you link it into a certain time of year if you're a house that particularly values honoring the seasonal changes. You like link it on to some other experience that you enjoy doing together, and just make sure you carve out some time. It doesn't have to even be more than an hour, just to have a round for everyone to share what are you enjoying and what are you longing for more of. Or this is a neat question: what made you want to leave recently? To allow a bit more of those vulnerable shares to come up, but to do it on a regular basis, so you know that, okay, if I don't share something now, there's going to be another moment to share about it. Or like, if something's coming up, that maybe in a month or so you're going to have a retrospective, and there's going to be a moment to share that more deep vulnerable thing. I think that's one thing that makes it difficult for me if I don't know when we're gonna, like, if I don't know we're gonna have a specific time and place to share more of our longings, deeper longings. One, life can be so busy that I just brush it off, but also two, I know I need to carve it out for myself, and it can feel a bit more difficult to try and get everyone together in the first place and then drop my bomb.
yeah.
It's a lot of personal investment rather than co-holding an intention to care for
Mm.
our group field.
It's almost as if like you need someone else to also value it alongside you, not just you by yourself. There needs to be at least one other co-organizer of
Yeah,
this feelings meeting, feelings walk, whatever.
yeah,
My
true.
house personally, we had a walk a while ago, and that was
Mhm.
really interesting because I think in some ways a
Cool.
walk was much easier to say things to
Yeah.
say to each other because we had this like other stimuli going around. You know how like some people
Mhm.
are able to talk more about their feelings if they're driving rather
Yes.
than when they're not driving, which I find such an intrigue. I've had so many arguments in a car with my parents compared to at home. Um, yeah, and I think
Totally.
that's what's happening when you go on a walk in comparison to if you were like sitting in a lounge, like looking at each other.
Yeah. And
um,
also when you're in the same place where you experience daily life, it can be nice to get out and just be in a different space, not be distracted, or just to be able to step out and like you can it's almost like stepping up onto the balcony and looking down at a party when you step out of the house and be like, okay, let's look back on how we've been while we're not in the space. Yeah. Wait,
mm,
like, I love this walking idea as well, Abby. Like, I know that where you are, there's some lovely nature walks, and just the idea of going on a day hike where you say, okay, we're gonna hike together, the six of us or whatever, and as we hike, we'll have moments of being in pairs, and we'll rotate, and we just like sort of have a walking question for each other as we go, and then at the end of the day, we'll go and have a meal, and we'll share what's been coming up for us. And that can be really helpful to not have to like if every person arrive in the group and share in the whole group immediately what's been going on for you, but have a time to first talk with just one other person or maximum two other people to help you reflect and digest like what has been going on for me. Often when I arrive in a group, I'm invited to share into a group on a big question. I'm like, poof,
yeah.
let me slow down and think. Like, I don't even know what. Like, give me a moment to reflect before I share. So I
Mm,
really like that idea. Yeah.
mm, yeah. I think you can have these structures, but I kind of want to go back to the second part of what when I was trying to embody that perspective,
Yeah.
what difficult about this
Yeah.
situation. And I think the question that came up was kind of like, what if they say no?
Mm.
um,
What if you say no to the thing you want more of?
yeah, and how do I deal with that? Or maybe not the whole group says no, but like one person says no, or two people out of three say no, or something.
Mm.
And how do I want to I don't know, deal with that? And I mean, I've got friends outside, sure, and but like I guess a part I imagine a part of me would feel really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not guaranteed that just because you ask for something that people are gonna be wanting it. And I do have yeah, it's true. Like sometimes it might be that people are like, I don't think that's what I want in this space. Like, oh, I don't wanna have this space being a workshop space. It's my house. Or I don't wanna be I don't have capacity for deeper emotional support or more meetings or something like that. Yet there's something I think if we're able to express our needs and at least be understood by people and have people reflect back, like, okay, I hear that's what you're longing for, without having to commit to something they don't want to do, it can just shift something in itself by just having the awareness in the group of that's what's important to me. And as I
Yeah.
said, it might be that you realize that it's just so important for the group to have the information, because it might be that if you keep bringing this in after a year and like still not being resolved, it might just be clear to the whole group of, hey, yeah, Abby's had this longing for a deeper emotional connection for a long time now. And then if you say at some point, like, I don't know if this is working for me, I got to move on. It's just a whole different experience for the group rather than you building up and not saying something, resenting, pulling away, and then boom, you're like, after 1 year, suddenly I'm going, guys, and then the group being like, what happened?
Going, I felt so lonely for such a long
Yeah,
time in this house. Sorry.
exactly. And then everyone going, why didn't you tell us? We had no idea.
Why didn't you tell us like a year ago?
Yeah, like I want to shift it away from like telling people what you want so that then expecting everyone to say yes, to telling people what you want in order to stay attuned to the truth of the reality of what you all need, and put the information in there together and see, is there a solution with togetherness that works, or if it means leaving, that at least we understand why the split has happened, and then we
Yeah.
can all be like together and like, okay, Abby, we so wish you the best for this, and I'm sorry that's not what happened here, or we couldn't provide that, but it's about that's so important to me for like transitioning well. It doesn't come as a surprise, but it comes as a, okay, we've known this and we've been trying something out and it's not really working. Okay, uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm, that sense of um let's see, what was it? Mm, mm. No, I've forgotten. I've forgotten. I haven't.
yeah,
Yeah, I appreciate that reflection from you. And yes, when you share it, kind of you're looking for if there's space for collaboration. There's by sharing what's coming up for you. Um,
yeah,
because if people aren't aware of it, then there's no that you can't see the spaces for collaboration. You can't see if they would arise or not in the first place.
mm,
Um,
yeah,
I've been watching loads of Heidi Priebe videos. She's amazing. She talks about attachment theory a lot. And one of the concepts she introduced me to is the idea of like a good faith conversation versus like communication in bad faith.
cool,
And my understanding, I might be wrong, so you might have to double check by looking up Heidi's stuff, but like good faith conversation is around sharing in a way such that people can become aware of what's going on, and you're two adults who are kind of becoming aware of what's going on, and then finding ways where people's kind of boundaries and willingnesses to act are kind of overlapping in a way that is harmonious.
mm,
So yeah, that's what I mean by finding that space for collaboration in meeting each other's needs.
mm,
And a bad faith conversation is when you're sharing in such a way that you're trying to manipulate other people to do it, um,
mm,
do what you want. And if they don't do what you want, then like you just change the way you speak or change the way you're sharing it such that it's and then it's not really. it's not really about that adult to adult conversation. It's more about like, I'm trying to get you to do something. It's something that happens quite unconsciously and subconsciously.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, thanks for naming that. I think there's like definitely like skills to be built in how we have these conversations. Maybe it would be really nice to actually have a link to the Heidi Priebel, some of her resources in this below this video as well. Do that. I know. I think also something that helps people come to that has helped me to bring these tensions in a adult to adult way is also to just you mentioned something before about having maybe like one person who either understands my need or can help me articulate what and get to like what I actually need. So, for example, like if I'm feeling really triggered about some things, maybe talk to one of my housemates or someone from outside the house first to help me clarify like what's my longing, what's my unmet need there, and what would be my wish that I could name without it being a demand. Like, can I and maybe navigate like how would I feel if I got to know um, what what other opportunities exist beyond this. Mostly just to help me clarify what my message is and what my request is, so I can come across as like opening an invitation for something more in the group or for collaboration rather than coming in as like criticizing what's not there. You know what I mean?
Ooh, I'd love to see that, like an example of that. Could you?
Yeah. Yeah. So for example, with this like emotional need, like I want more emotional support. So one if the example of like criticizing what's not there could sound like, guys, I'm giving so much and I never get anything back from this group, and it makes me feel like I just want to like walk away sometimes. I just don't feel like anyone cares about me as much as I care about other people, and it just feels like unfair. There's like kind of blaming. Whereas the version of like being more mature is saying more, it sounds more vulnerable perhaps, but being like, yeah, I really love giving support to you all. And sometimes I notice I'm feeling a bit lonely and in my own cause, and maybe I find it more difficult to reach out sometimes. But I'm just wondering if there's something that's um, like I would just really love to be receiving more emotional support sometimes, and that could look like maybe if you haven't seen me, if I've been locked in my room for a while, like knocking on my door and asking how I'm doing, inviting me for a walk sometimes, and I just wonder how people feel about that, or if there's something like anything that I'm doing that's blocking you from asking me for support. It's inviting in a dialogue about support,
Mm.
and it's being clear like what's something you specifically could do that I would enjoy, and it's being clear on like the need, like about what I'm longing for, rather than pointing out what I'm seeing others not doing. Also,
Mm.
yeah,
Mm.
maybe
Yeah.
even one saying like, "Does anyone else have this feeling as well, or am I the only one?" Can also help me. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm struck by how in the second example it's a kind of an invitation and not, I don't know. I suppose not really like an instruction in some ways. You
Mm.
know.
So yeah.
I guess there is, it's really interesting. It's kind of the phrase that comes up is like leaving space for no, or leaving space for adjustment, leaving space for, yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
While also being assertive about what would be your dream. I think until you really name what you want, people are not
Yeah, and
they're unlikely to guess it. Like, I want you to knock on my door if you haven't seen me. I
I want you
want
to
you
knock
to
the
invite
door.
me for a
Yeah, yeah.
walk.
It's not just vague, like, I want more emotional support. If
Mm,
actually, that's better than better on some. You could even be more abstract than that, but yeah,
yeah. But
yeah.
still, yeah, emotional support. I want more emotional support can mean many different things. So like
Still very vague.
what
Yeah.
is it for you? Yeah. That's why I find this having a second person to listen to you first, to be like, what do you really long for? Like what's the image that comes to your mind when you want emotional
Mm.
support? How can you be specific? But also that can be so valuable having someone else in the group even willing to, like, if they understand your wish for emotional support, just being there to be your ally and like help you express that there. Or even if your group is not used to expressing tensions, not used to, or you're not sure if that wish for emotional support will be even understood or received, if there's just one other person in your group who resonates with something that you're longing for, like come together as with an invitation to the group to talk about emotional support. Yeah, there was a moment I think where that happened recently in one of my co-living scenarios where I heard two people who said to me separately that they had a need, an unmet need, and I was like, why don't you guys talk together and bring that to the group? And then they did talk together, and then there's something going to happen. So it's like cool, you know. It's powerful to find someone else who, yeah, will be your buddy in bringing this unmet need and trying to um, create a cultural shift to talk about it, even if that's not what's normalized in your group yet.
And what if I can't find a buddy?
Mm, might be so. I think even just having someone outside your group to like talk about it with afterwards, if you try it out, then you can
Mm,
go to them afterwards to be like, this is how it went. What do I do now? You know, and be good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah. It's not always possible to find someone in your group who wants what you want. Yeah.
Wow, I have like so many other scenarios of tensions and conflicts that we didn't get around to. But I'm also noticing the time
Yeah.
that we talked to. Um yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation. I thought the particular example we landed on was really heartwarming to talk about, and I actually enjoyed embodying that perspective.
Mm,
It's just like, oh, it's so sorry. It's like it's so close to my heart that is something that I have experienced sometimes, but I've noticed other people have experienced sometimes, and that they have like raised it in the group, and I it is just so difficult, and I imagine other people also feel similar. Um,
mm,
say co-living scenarios where they're trying to make more intentional or even intentional co-living scenarios that didn't really talk about this before they
yeah.
before they started.
Mm,
Yeah. Any
definitely.
closing thoughts, Jocelyn?
Yeah, this topic is very close to my heart as well, especially conflict transformation. I mean, that's a lot of what I do is I'm a mediator and help people with setting up conflict transformation systems in their teams and groups. So it's I talk about it for a long time, and it's for me where the life of a group can really come alive, really, by talking about tensions and beyond the first like, oh, this is amazing, to like also be able to navigate tensions well, because conflict's never going to go away. Like it's just a natural part of human systems, social systems, that there are going to be moments where one person wants something, another person wants something else, or there's no time to discuss things, or misunderstandings happen. It's just normal. It happens in every group. So if it's happening in your group, if you're struggling, like, it's so normal, you know? It's easy to think we're the only ones and everyone else has got it figured out, or it's gonna be easier somewhere else. Like, no, but the point is to learn how to do conflict well, I think, which is like learning how we manage to talk about dissatisfactions, how we manage to talk about things that are triggering us, how to create enough trust and um coherence within us so that we know that when we bring up a conflict or a tension, it's not the only thing, you know, and it's not gonna um, rock the boat so much that we'll capsize, but to build up experience after experience of, oh, this actually helps us to grow deeper. I think it really builds a sense of like emotional resilience within people when they learn that they can bring conflicts and it makes them stronger. So that's my wish for all groups of people trying to live together and work together. And hope
Hmm.
this little video and our conversation somehow adds a drop of inspiration towards that vision. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Mhm.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, who knows? We might have another episode or we might not. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, cool. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.